you. Thank you very much. Yeah. Given that this is the second last slot in the Euroelectric Power Summit this year, I appreciate very much that you have decided to attend this event. I'm also very pleased to get the opportunity to moderate this discussion on a very interesting subject, the Power Talk on Climate Adaptation, the game plan for resilience. The aim of this talk is to facilitate the strategic discussions on adaptation of the power system to climate change hazards, as well as other threats to the security of the power system, and to explore regulatory, technical, and societal implications of these threats. The combination of changing climate conditions and the growing importance of electricity in the clean energy transition means that the power sector resilience is even more essential than ever before. The industry needs to boost resourcing to make power supplies more resilient to disruptions from weather, cyber attacks, and multi-factor events. Our panel of experts will provide their insights on the future power system, the environment in which it will operate, and to identify critical resiliency and adaptation activities that needs to be done, and the creation of an associated regulatory framework. Why is then resilience so important right now? So even before the Ukrainian invasion started, the power sector has already been facing the looming threat of more and more extreme weather events. Long-term meteorological predictions say that the average temperature will increase with more heat in the summer and more heat waves, increasing seawater temperatures and levels, as well as an increased number of severe storms. We have seen in recent years already an increase in extreme weather conditions, such as extreme flooding in Central Europe, Storm Francis hitting Ireland and the UK, not meant to mention the wildfires in the Mediterranean. And obviously, Europe needs to brace itself for more resilience to such extreme events. This year, Euroelectric, in collaboration with EPRI, the Electric Power Research Institute, is conducting a flagship project on resilience, exploring what regulatory measures are needed to enhance Europe's preparedness from the whole value chain perspective. And in the report, we will try to answer the questions. How will resilience play an increasing role in the performance of the power sector, both including networks and generation? What can the power sector do to build and maintain a secure infrastructure to withstand these extreme weather events? And how can EU respond to this challenge with regulatory measures? And I would like to you have to keep your eyes open in the end of the year so you don't miss the publishing of that report. And now it is time to invite our keynote speaker, Mr. Arshad Mansour from EPRI. Welcome, Arshad. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Joran. It's an honor and pleasure to be here today. Don't have any slides, don't have any questions, but if you have an iPhone, I'll ask you to Google something. So you heard this morning, Christian Ruby, where's Christian? Christian here somewhere? Well, Christian Ruby will come. He announced the Power Plants Initiative. It's an industry initiative that was announced this morning. We did a similar thing last month, and it's a Climate Ready initiative. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Climate Ready initiative. It's an industry initiative led by the power sector. But before I do that, you heard the word EPRI. Who is EPRI? Well, we shape the future of clean energy that's affordable and resilient, working in 40 countries with over 400 energy companies. That's who we are. Our 1,100 engineers and scientists work with thousands of experts in the industry and IEA and European Union Department of Energy to shape this future. I'm going to ask you to think about, ponder a question as you're hearing. And the question is, are you ready for climate ready? And it's a play of words, just like power plants was a play of word. Are you ready? The first ready is an English word, R-E-A-D-Y. And are you ready for climate ready? The last ready is R-E-A-D-I, not a Y. And it stands for R-E is resilience, A-D is adaptation, and I is an initiative. It's a global initiative to develop a transparent, comprehensive, and consistent framework on A, how we do climate risk assessment, B, how do we take that risk and impose it in the way we plan, design, operate the power system, and C, what are the mitigation measures? What are the costs? What do we do first? Is it cybersecurity first or climate first? So that's what the initiative is about. But let me just give you 3 things to ponder as you're looking at, are you ready for climate ready? If you have Google, you can search climate ready, but ready with an I, and then you'll find out what the industry is doing on climate ready. So 3 things. First, and all 3 are interrelated. We should be ambitious about our plan for decarbonization, and we are. If you look at the 2030 goals that was set on COP26, you have to increase 3x, 4x times of everything, 3 times, 4 times more. But ambition should not take away the perspective of reality. The reality is the climate is already changing. The reality is we will reach 1.5 degrees C by 2035, most likely. The reality is this change will impact weather of the 2030, 2040. And it's a IPCC report that came out a couple of months ago was stark. It says even with a 2 degree C climate, 1.5 degree C rise, you will see 4 times more the probability of heat waves, 2 times more probability of precipitation, that's flooding. You saw what happened in Germany last year. You saw what's happening in wildfire in California and Australia. And almost 1.5 times more probability of a drought, which is what's happening in Western United States right now. So it's clear. But also what is clear is we now have the computational ability in the world of climate science modeling to take the global climate model and bring it down at a localized, almost a 10 square mile area level to predict how the climate will evolve in 2035, 2040, 2045 for a 2 degree C rise or a 2.5 degree C rise. What does it do to wind speed? What does it do to ice loading? What does it do to precipitation? Name it. These are all climate weather variables. Second thing that I want you to keep in mind as you're thinking about or Googling climate ready with an I, is the society's dependence on electricity will have to fundamentally change for this decarbonization journey to happen. Today, globally, and also in the US and Europe, around roughly 20% of the energy that we use is electricity. 80% is not. And if you fast forward 2040 or 2050, and if we are going to reach net zero, then the use of electricity could not only quadruple, we will do direct electrification, but electricity will create clean molecules, clean energy factors, ammonia, liquid ammonia, hydrogen. So now you have society depending on the grid to produce this electricity. Can you afford the type of outages that we are seeing now? What is the value of resiliency to a customer or society in 2045 or 2040 when half of the cars or maybe 2/3 of the cars or all of the cars are electric, and when you have heating in home that's electric, and you're producing hydrogen through the grid, and that need for resiliency, you cannot value it in today's value. If you ask a customer society, what is the value of your resilience today? And if you ask the same question to a customer who has 2 electric EVs, who has home heating that's electric, it's relying on electricity for a lot of things. So societal dependence on electricity is growing, will continue to grow. The value of resilience will continue to grow. The type of outages we are seeing now cannot happen in this 2040, 2045 timeframe. So both these 2 things, one, climate is changing, even if we are ambitious in decarbonization. And second, the value of electricity for society will grow. These 2 things led to this Climate Ready initiative. It's an initiative that's addressing 3 specific areas. But all 3 areas, there's a common goal. We need a consistent, comprehensive, but a transparent method If the method is not transparent, regulators, politicians, policymakers will not listen to it because they will think this is just another investment that's coming from the electric sector. And what is it? The first, if you're going to take a global climate model and take historical data at a local area and predict what your 2045 climate could be, there are 20 ways to do this. There are universities, organization, metrology schools that are doing it. So I say it's 20 secret sauce will give you 20 different results. Well, globally, we need a common framework. And the results will not be deterministic, it will be probabilistic. You cannot say for sure that 2045 for a 2-degree sea rise, the probability of drought or the wind speed increase will be 20 miles an hour. It's a probabilistic. How do you take that probabilistic result and overlay it in the way we plan, design, operate the power system and see how it impacts every part of the system? We need another consistent, comprehensive, transparent method on this impact assessment. And then impact assessment sounds easy, but it's actually not easy because you get all the weather variables. And sometimes the variables impact, 2 or 3 variables could impact a system. Case in point, look at wind. Well, wind did impact the overall European wind regime last year. You saw that we call it a wind drought. A wind speed increase during a hurricane or a storm does impact wind turbines. Wind also cools transmission lines. So if you have a day that is very hot and the load is high and the wind is not blowing, you have to derate the transmission line maybe 10 to 20% in 2040, 2045. So how do you put together a comprehensive framework that gives the guidance to the electric utility and the regulators and the policymakers that this is how we will predict the weather, this is how we will look at the impact, and the final thing is you've looked at the impact. What are the mitigation methods? It's all infrastructure build out. Why not microgrid? That's what we are working on in California for the fire situation. Why not other opportunities for resilience that customers can use? Why not put a battery at a customer home? And the battery provides flexibility to the DSO 99.999% of the time. And that one time in 4 years when an event happens, that battery is a resilience resource for the customers. So we need another consistent, comprehensive method on this third thing, which is what are the mitigation measures? What are the cost benefit? How do you compare it with investment for cybersecurity or investment for decarbonization? What is more important? And really, that's what we are trying to do on this Climate Ready initiative. That is what the industry is doing. And I would say the electric sector is leading. And we expect very soon, and it's a 2-year work, but we will have work products coming out on a continuous basis, which will provide the guidance for decades. So let me end up with a question that I get asked. Arshad, do we do decarbonization first or resiliency first? If I'm going to invest in decarbonization, do I invest in resiliency? And my answer is both. It's 2 sides of the same coin. And the reason why it's both, and it's important to actually lead with decarbonization, because resiliency investment will increase the cost, no doubt about that. You have to figure out how to reduce the cost burden to customers. And the way you do that is electrify mobility, electrify heating. An average US household that earns $45,000 pays $4,500 a year energy bill. Out of that, $2,200 is gasoline. If you can electrify, you reduce that. So even if you increase the electric side, net, it's a savings. So you cannot say it's either decarbonization or resiliency. It actually has to be both. And I would say it should lead with decarbonization, but resiliency should come very quickly, very soon, in a proactive way, not after a flood or not after a storm. So with that, it's once again an honor and a pleasure to be here today. Would be happy to listen to the panelists that's coming up. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that interesting speech. I will now introduce the rest of the panel. So we start with Stefan Lechner, Director, Euratom Safeguards at the European Commission. Welcome, and have a seat. And then we have Christine Materazzi-Wagner, Chair of ACER and Syria Electricity Working Groups. Welcome. Have a seat. And the next one is Alejandro Hernandez, Head of Unit Renewable Integration and Secure Electricity at the International Energy Agency. Oh, thank you. Have a seat, please. And last but not least, Christina Papapostolou, European Affairs Director at the Greek utility PPC. Welcome. Have a seat. So, and now, before we start our discussions, we want to have a polling question for the audience. So, if you please answer that one, let's see what the result will be. Okay, it seems like you don't see that very well, but is the distribution system 53%, generation fleet 22%, transmission system 14%, and customer and retail 11%, which makes the network very important. Of course, if you combine transmission and distribution, that it's really important. Of course, that's really already today, now and then, problem with the weather. I would like to ask a question to you, Arshad. You are meeting a lot of people discussing resilience, and given that the transition is ongoing in a society and the electrification as well, do you perceive that the customers are behaving differently, or they having different demands, or anxiety, or even hesitation to electrification?
A great question. I think it's too early to say. Like I said, today only 2% of electric cars in the US is electric. But once it becomes 20% or 30%, when building electrification ramps up, their valuing of resiliency will be very different today. Today, when you have a storm, after a storm, they're very serious. But within 2 to 3 months, that goes away. But we as a society should look into the future and say, hey, this is the same customer. If he or she has 2 electric cars, will behave very differently on their need for resiliency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Thank you. We have a situation where as an investor, you are normally very keen to protect your assets and your investments. So you have, in a way, a driving force yourself to really invest in resilience that you know will be needed during the lifetime of your plant. And the question is, which I would like maybe Christine to answer first, and then Christina, you can give your opinion about that. Do you believe that will be enough to create the needed investment, or do we need regulation of this also?
Of course, as a regulator, it would always be easier to say we need more regulation. But in this case, I indeed think we have, at least for the moment, enough regulation for resilience and to keeping our networks and transmission and distribution level quite safe. What we need, indeed, is what Arshad just stated. We need a clearer picture on what will come in the next years, in the next decades. What we have quite well already set up on the European level is all the modeling, all the simulations, all the scenario building related to a 10-year, or let's say 5 to 10-year time horizon. There is a new methodology on the European resource adequacy assessment, so checking on what will happen in a synchronous cold spell together with a heat wave somewhere else in Europe. So there's a lot of modeling and a lot of methodologies already decided and ongoing, and it's quite tricky to develop that in detail, so that it's realistic in the end. But I think what one input is that we urgently need is to get an idea on how would the climate look like and how many cold spells could we expect in 2030 or 2035. And then, of course, as a regulator, we always have to see on the cost benefit. So we need a clear picture first, then see where additional measures, additional power plants or additional grid components are needed. And then we need to find a balance between, between the cost and the benefit for the consumer.
Yeah. If you, I give the word to you first then to answer.
Okay.
Yeah, I can.
Yes.
One additional issue is, of course, you can invest to different levels. You can invest to the level that your assets don't get destroyed by the weather, and you can invest to the level that it's still able to be up and running during the extreme weather events. Please, sorry.
No, I would agree with Christine that we have a number of regulatory toolkits available, and especially the last Repower EU, which was available in May, is focusing, it tries to look and enhance the resilience of the energy system by increasing the energy savings, by accelerating the renewables, and of course by diversifying the different energy supply chain. I would be focusing especially on the last one, diversification of supply chain and the security of supply is a thing that we should be focusing on. And also in terms of additional regulatory details need to be focused. The simplification of permitting and licensing procedures on the deployment of renewables, as it seems that this will level up the deployment of renewables, and this will allow domestic energy production. It will enhance domestic energy production, and with his turn, it will enhance the resilience at the EU level.
Yeah, thank you. Stefan, you were...
Yes, right buzzword, EU level. So at the EU side, of course, there is also, I would confirm, enough regulation already in place. But we should not pretend that this all started yesterday, because there has been quite some action also in the past. After 2014, first invasion to Crimea, there was a very hard winter with almost failed negotiations between Ukraine and Russia and the EU about funding and financing for Russian gas. And then in 2016, the European Commission proposed the Clean Energy for All Europeans package, also looking into all the mechanisms that it would take to counteract any kind of resilience issues. The reverse gas flows to Ukraine were introduced. The solidarity principles were introduced. The risk preparedness that is currently applying was introduced. It took from 2016 to 2019 to get this all formally adopted. So the co-legislation process, of course, with 28, 27 member states takes some time. Now we have pulled and led the European Union from the Green Deal to an increased ambition of Fit for 55% greenhouse gas reductions by 2030 instead of 50%. Then there was COVID, and we had the resilience and recovery instruments that were displaced to just actually mitigate and accelerate, and not to fall back into the status that we used to have before. And when all of this was adopted last December, all of a sudden we are seeing ourselves confronted with the current geopolitical situation, with the Russian unprovoked invasion into Ukraine, and we are coming up with independency of Russian energy sources, Repower EU. So this is an ongoing process where the regulative instruments are all in place, including resilience instruments, including proposals of the European Commission on the CER directive, which is the critical entities resilience, issued by the Commission and proposed in December 2020, but still not formally adopted by the Union. So we're working on this for years already, looking into the future, and I think the instruments are still there, or already there, or will be there soon. It just requires implementation in the correct way, then rapidly.
Okay, thank you. looking at the present regulation, there is already some in the requirement for generator, for example, there is quite detailed, say, regulation about how a generator should be resilient to disturbances from the grid, for example, and could that be a way of that would be a way to create the same kind of regulation for other resilience? I'm looking at you, Christine.
Well, indeed, the RFG network code is quite detailed on some parts of fault right-through capabilities and similar requirements. So procedural-wise, yes, of course, there could be some provisions. What I see tricky at this point in time is that even if you think of our home countries, there might be regions with completely different types of crises that are to be expected, different scenarios. It could be wildfires, it could be floods, it could be avalanches, it could be whatever. And so I think it would be hard just now to add something or to amend the regulation and cover all the aspects that we now have. And I think we need a bit more certainty first to see what we really can expect. Because to be very clear, 24/7, the whole year round for any of the end consumers would not be possible. It's a technical system. We always have failures in the technical systems. So in fact, it's a question to limit the number of hours where electricity for the end customer might not be available. And this could be simply because there are construction works in front of your home where some how do you say, some of the machines grab the cable, and this could be a climate change indicated accident. But anyway, so what we should do is to agree on this, or have a common understanding on how many hours per year would be acceptable, and what should be done on the private side for those who would need some uninterrupted power supply, for example. But otherwise, it's really to balance the cost. So 100% is not possible, and it's not payable, in fact.
And back to Stefan, you are very expert on cybersecurity, I have understood, and have been working with that for a long time. And if it is hard to understand what is in front of us concerning climate change, it's even harder to understand what will the next cyber attack look like, I guess. Or are you considering that in some way, or trying to understand and making the regulation in line with that?
Yeah, thanks, Goran. We are looking into cybersecurity as well, but you need to understand that in the European framework, national security is the legal competence of the EU member states. So the Commission has a limited set of legal powers there, and the member states prevail. Therefore, we are doing soft measures, trying to bring together the member states, doing European Commission communications, trying to establish a network code on cybersecurity, trying to just establish better collaboration on the upcoming issues. We have seen that the cyber attacks have really increased, and we will see also an increase in the energy sector. The very first cyber-induced outage of the energy network already resulted from a Russian attack, and we are having seen this 5, 6, 7 years ago, something like that, in Estonia, and we do not want to see a repetition. So, what do you think about cybersecurity? Ashad says, should this be done first, or should actually climate change be done first? And this is not the question. If you think cybersecurity is expensive, then try to do without. This is nothing that we could simply leave out. We need to consider it because we are building IT systems, and climate change equals electrification, equals diversification and distribution of generation. So if we're going for renewable energies, for wind, for solar, we will really spread out the assets in the field, and they will only be available over the network, and they will be orchestrated by information technology. So of course, the cyber component should be there. And the good news is the technology is there. It is available, it just needs to be deployed correctly. So I would not worry so much about cybersecurity. I would worry rather about whoever is operating the systems not thinking far enough, or not being experienced enough, or not getting the right instructions or the right consultancy, or perhaps the CEO ignoring it, thinking it might be cheaper without. And the issue is not at the technical level, the issue is not at the political level, the issue again is at the correct implementation level.
Yeah, that's right. We are building a very vulnerable system with remotely controlled switchgear on the transmission grid, distribution grid, and now also more or less all new power plants is remotely controlled. So, do you feel safe in that? That's not something we have chosen to do ourselves.
Surely there is no such thing as 100% security or 100% cybersecurity. So what does it mean to feel safe? Does it mean that I would never experience any blackout somewhere? I mean, we've seen it in the past, and we have not varied so much, and we still feel safe because the blackouts are limited. And this comes back to the question before, how much outage would we want to take? For cyber-induced blackouts, at least we could think ahead, and the European Commission has taken the lead in 2016, instilling some wisdom and thinking with the member states how to protect the future smart grid, which actually is the current smart grid because it's already around. Unfortunately, in energy, the situation is not straightforward. So we're having cascading effects that in the architecture the internet would not want to see and would not allow for. So we are not in a meshed network. We are having a mix of legacy technology from the 80s or even older, not built for cybersecurity, and we are adding the Internet of Things, where the smart home cell phone app will steer everything and is even outside the regulative framework that the European Commission can control under the energy file. And with this mix and with the resilience requirements, we are having to address cybersecurity in the energy sector in a particular way. We got real-time requirements that we do not see even in telecommunications. So the experts need to do their homework correctly, but I feel safe because I know the big companies are having their experts and they're taking the task seriously, and the smaller ones are not that much imposed. It would be very important to understand who is systemically irrelevant. But this we have learned from the financial crisis, and we got it in the regulative proposals of the European Commission.
Just to maybe add a technology component to it's not all solutions are cyber related. You can protect for cybersecurity doing other things. And one great example is the work that's going on in the industry. It's called a spare tire project. What is a spare tire? In your car, if your tire goes out, you got a spare tire. It's not as good as the original tire, but it'll take you to the next level. So we are now putting playbooks on what happens if there is a communication blackout or a cyber blackout. All these remote things, is there a way we can go back to 1965 where there are paper instructions, we send people to every substation, and we are actually manually operating the grid? Sounds crazy, but those are the type of playbooks that has to be built because you can never guarantee zero incident. You have to figure out if an incident happens, how do you react to it?
Thank you. If let's say an investor is planning to make a huge investment in a power plant or something else, a grid or anything, to optimize the investment from the resilience point of view, you need to know you need to have a solid base to use in your optimization and really know quite good what will happen during the lifetime, which could be 25, could be 60 years also, with a decent geographic granularity as well. Will we have these kind of predictions reliable? I think that might be a question for you, Alejandro.
It's hard to say. I'm very glad that about EPRI's initiative to bring a new methodology and bring all this new data that we are having. And for sure, as climate science gets better, we will get more and more information on what might happen. I think this might not be enough. I think we have to go a step further because, for instance, we have to be conscious that our models very often, they are basically approximations in which we can say, okay, we know that if the demand increases, if there is 1 degree less in the winter, electricity demand in France will increase by so much. and that will happen. But this is still an approximation. And when we are talking about extreme weather events, what we need to understand is these kind of approximations of our models, they might not be valid. So, and I think what happened in Texas in February during this cold spell, it's a very good example. Like, it was a system that was built to resist tough summer events, but not a winter one. And they were prepared for the worst winter they have faced. So the worst winter on records, which for like most regulators, would you agree, would say, well, this is what you should be prepared for, right? Not for more. So that was an honest preparation. And the problem with climate change is that those honest preparations, no, being prepared for the wars you have in the record, might not be enough. That's the bad news, I would say. So that will increase for the challenge in understanding what are the possible contingencies you have to be prepared for.
Okay. You mentioned that we will reach 1.5 degree already 2030. I heard yesterday, I think Christian said that we had a trajectory towards 3 degrees. I'm questioning if we are then deciding to make more investment, heavier investment in decarbonization, will that really affect the amount of money we need to spend on adaptation or resiliency? Can we change the situation?
I think it's interrelated, but you'll change it, may not be 3 degrees, but 2.5 degrees C. But the reason we need to do this now is, we call this term design basis. A system is built based on a design basis. That design basis should be different for 2045, but we are building system today that will last in 2045. So we need to it's not a new methodology. European Union has a methodology, NASA has a methodology. We need a consistent methodology, but the results should go to power system planners, engineers, CGRE, IEEE, because they will have to look at how those weather variables impacts. What should be the wind speed capability of a transmission line? 120 miles an hour, or should it be built for 140 miles an hour? Because if you do it early, the cost is not that much. If you already built it and then you have to change it, it's a huge cost.
Yeah, thank you. Going back to these poll results we had here, it was a heavy overweight of transmission grid. That was by far the most important, and then generation and distribution grids. Do you have any thoughts about that? Do you agree on that, that the grid is the most important? Any of you?
I'm sorry, I would say I disagree. I would have voted for the transmission system because it's a backbone, and it's the one which it takes the longest time to restore. If you have to rebuild, no, if there is a hurricane passing by, as in Puerto Rico, no, with Maria, and you have to build again, it can take really long. So I would have thoughts on that, but I'm happy to change my mind, not to hear other opinions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would perhaps add that there are different perspectives on this question. So the distribution system is very important and has players, more than 2,000 DSOs in the EU, who are small city DSOs who are just providing power to the final customers, to the households. So they might not be so skilled and so aware, so that might be a weak link in various dimensions, either financial capability or cyber resilience, you name it. But of course, they might not all be systemically relevant. Therefore, it depends on the perspective here. The European Commission has focused a lot also on the generation, because moving from centralized generation to renewable energies, of course we instill resilience automatically, because there is no central block that can fail in one go. And these are the things that are currently on the moving landscape. So I think they're all connected, but depends a bit on the perspective.
And maybe you're on just a point. I think there's a fifth thing that's missing here. And the fifth thing is, it's not transmission, distribution, generation, but we have a huge opportunity to build resiliency for customers. In California, wildfire will make your transmission line, you have to disconnect the transmission line on purpose. But if you have a local regional microgrid, that could serve many purposes, not just resiliency purpose. And another I think it's unfortunate, as power engineer, I will say it's unfortunate that solar PV rooftop. Imagine how many rooftop solar PV you have in Germany or in California. Millions. Imagine the power went out, but the sun is still shining. You cannot even charge your cell phone with the 5 kilowatt rooftop PV that you have up on your roof because we don't have grid-forming inverters in all the rooftop solar. So are you investing in distribution? Are you investing in transmission? No, you're investing in customers to have a grid-forming inverter. So when the power goes out and the sun is out there, you may not power your whole home, but you can power your cell phone, your TV, maybe a small refrigerator, that medicine. So I think that thinking of dual purpose solutions, a solution that has multiple purpose, is what will lead us to a more cost-effective resilience option.
Oh, okay, it's that called prepping for the disaster. You had a comment as well.
If I may add here, I mean, in fact, it's a whole system we need to consider. So it's not helpful if we just invest and make one part of the system reliable and resilient. But for a reliable supply to the customers, we need to consider all parts of the system. Of course, it's always good for specific parts to have kind of fallback solutions, be that you can still drive to the substation and without remote control still put on the switches or put them off, whatever is needed. But generally, I think this cannot be separated. It needs to be a holistic view on the whole system.
Of course, there is also a difference in the transmission and the distribution grid. The consequences of a failure in the transmission grid is so much larger than in the distribution grid, of course. Christina, you are representing an investor here, and I guess you are doing quite a lot of investment, and as you mentioned, are you already now starting to think about resilience and changing your investment decisions due to the climate change?
Yes, because climate change affects the investment decisions and the overall strategy of energy utility, and we cannot be exempted from that. So what we do in order to cope with this is we take very seriously while creating our strategy and our investment plan. It is always accompanied with a detailed analysis on the risks and opportunities that arise from the climate change and the climate conditions. For this reason, we have different pillars that we are focusing on. The first is that we have trying to incorporate and to implement the task force, the guidelines, first of all, of the climate-related information which was introduced last year, in June 2019 from the European Commission. And we also we are currently implementing the task force on climate-related financial disclosures from the Financial Stability Board. But apart from that, we are also our own scenarios in order to ensure resilience in our investments that they have we take into account two frameworks, two aspects. The one is the climate conditions, the change in the climate conditions, and the second is the economic change and the regulatory change, and of course the technological change. So it's a very ongoing process, and we keep our eyes and our staff is always focused on the new developments, whatever affects this process.
Okay, thank you. I think we can take another polling question from the audience now. We have one more, which is a little bit easier than the other one, I guess. Could you put the next polling question on the screen? So, good. this is interesting. I would expect 100% yes, but there's some people here that doesn't think we should have more investment. But now, I think we have a few minutes if there is any questions from the audience. Do we have any questions you want to raise to the panel? No, nothing. Okay. Sorry, Stephen.
Hi, Stephen Woodhouse from A3. I was very interested in what you were saying about putting grid-forming converters at the domestic level. It's actually a conversation I had at lunchtime, thinking about resilience. We never used to have distributed generation and storage, so we weren't capable of delivering resilience from the bottom up. Has any work been done on that at all in the European context about protocols for islanding? I mean, I live in a rural area, my lights go out quite frequently. I've got a car with a battery parked outside. I would have loved for that option to be available to keep my lights on. But I've never heard any discussion of this in a European context at all.
Maybe on the technology side, there's a lot of discussion in the European and US, and it's not just rooftop. If you look at in Texas, and everybody heard about Texas, what we didn't see was we were 4 minutes away from a blackout. Texas was 4 minutes away. Texas is an isolated grid. If we had the blackout, then we'll have to figure out, do we have enough black start resources to bring the power systems back? So grid forming inverters for large solar plants and PV plants becomes a must, because if you go into an 80% renewable world, who's going to provide the black start capability? So I think technology-wise, it's advancing. I don't think on the policy-wise we're there. We look at transmission distribution kind of like in a unique way, not in a holistic way.
Stefan?
Can I just take the opportunity, before I need to leave a bit earlier, to come back at the European level? Before any kind of European Commission proposal, there is a huge consideration as impact assessment, which can run for a year to assess the impact of future policies. So these ideas of microgrid resilience, of separation, have been discussed in the context and have been discussed intensively. I mean, of course, nobody would want to have an electrical car which is just parked outside, and then in the morning when you need to drive to work, you find out that the battery is charged only to 20% because somebody else needed the energy overnight. And these are the things that we need to frame in a political context. So there are considerations. Technically, these things are being known and are being discussed. It might not have materialized in the legislation so far.
Thank you. Maybe one more question if there is, or then otherwise, I have a final question to the panel, to all of you, a short answer then. What, in your opinion, is the biggest obstacle to ensuring a resilient power system? Start with you.
I would say affordability, definitely affordability. Because all these investments in order to achieve resilience come at a cost. And this cost, we should maintain the energy cheap to our customers, so to the end customers. So it is very crucial to maintain affordability.
Mm-hmm. So you foresee so large investment that it will have a significant effect on the power
As a
price.
utility running a massive transition,
yeah.
one of the fastest at the moment at the European level, yes, we are already facing this.
Okay, thank you. Alejandro?
For most systems, I would say, or in general, it would be lack of planning. No, the fact that you are not taking advance some time to really think what are the possible contingencies of what you could be preparing for.
Okay, thank you. Christine?
Thank you. I would say that permitting is quite an important role, because all of our systems at the different levels that we just saw with the poll are so at their limits, with the inclusion of active consumers, of new players in the game, of renewables of different technologies and so on. So to cope with uncertainty, you need a bit more reserves in the system. So you need to build also new components on the generation side, on the network side, And for that, you need permitting. So I think it's also here a crucial point.
And Arshad?
Great, thank you. But before that, Stefan doesn't live because he didn't like my answer. He left because he's got a meeting with his boss's boss at the union, and it's a career limiting move if he's late for there. I think I'll go back to the first answer. I think this transition for a resilient, decarbonized grid has to be equitable and just. Equitable and just, especially for the disadvantaged community, the community that cannot handle an increase in energy cost because we are investing in resiliency, because we are decarbonizing. So an equitable or just transmission, I think, is the #1 priority as we are making this transition.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I will now try to conclude these discussions, and they have been very interesting. And first, it seems like the utilities have already started to consider this, and that feels very good. And it seems like the regulator is, let's say, satisfied with the regulation we have and will not start doing regulation, really looking forward and into something we don't know very much about. And that's, of course, very good, but I hope you don't wait too long. We have also concluded that it will probably be profitable for the utilities to do this investment, at least from a societal perspective, maybe not every investment, but to do this let's say, the higher ambition for climate mitigation. Those investments will give payback in terms of less investments in resilience activities, as I understand. And then, which really hurts me a bit to say, since I'm a pure generation guy, it seems like networks are most important, and specifically transmission network.
Can I add something?
Yes, please.
As we see I believe that as extreme weather conditions and extreme the intense events like wildfires or floods or anything else that we experience. I come from a Mediterranean country, and the summer is horrible for us. We see very often that we have an availability of our assets and also interruption of the infrastructural operations. In this essence, investing in resilience, investments in resilience, we see it comes, of course it comes at a cost, but experience shows that if we don't protect our assets, by investing in resilience, this impact and this exposure might be even more expensive.
Yeah, right.
So the decision is to invest.
Yeah, good. Okay, thank you very much for participating, and thank you for listening.